Hi, we are back, and I'm Luke Paints, the miniature painting coach, and we're gonna continue working on this miniature. Okay, so I've changed the lighting a little bit because I need to really get into the dark to kind of see what is going on, and we can't do that unless we have sufficient enough of lighting, particularly when we're painting. Our eyes constantly deceive us of what colors that we are or are not looking at. So I can look at it from afar like this, and I can tell what parts of the miniature, to me, it seems real enough. So for me, for example, right now it's the face and the chests and the clothing over here, and how it goes to this kind of like a um, much more gray rather than a saturated green. This part is doing okay. The fingers and whatnot, I'm not too worried about getting all those parts done yet. However, when we look at it from the side in this way, let's just kind of refocus our camera, we can see that the colors are there. However, right now it is still, the parts that are gray is still in a very thick mess. And particularly because we're working with so many colors underneath to try to translate those colors towards something that's much more noisy and much more to me, real life has a lot of colors that bounce around a lot, so I'm not satisfied with just kind of looking at one color. And now we're in the process of harmonizing them, and this process of control and harmonizing is where we really need to define our shapes, especially those that are in the darks. And so this is where we're at now in our painting process. Let's just kind of zoom out a little bit so that I can get closer. So painting with a smartphone in front of me to record the video is always a pretty big challenge. So we just kind of take it one step at a time, take our paints down, and go with it really slowly, because we need to define these parts that are bright versus the parts that are dark now. And it is from these areas where we actually see if I actually have my paints done right, because I need to be defining the shape, and if my paints aren't aren't thin enough, it will mean that I will need to go over them and kind of fix them a little bit here and there. So we're just kind of taking our time with this spot, and we can kind of see that go a little bit. So you can see that there's a reflection that's really bothering me from this side. So we're gonna dim this light to this much, so that way we can see it a little bit better. We'll shine this light in this way, so that way we can paint in the dark just for a little bit, so that we can get those we can pump up that gray. So first we're gonna do it like this, right, so that we can have our eyes adjust to those colors. We'll turn up the brightness a little bit afterwards, but essentially I want to focus on these parts, and this is why we're painting in a lot more darker territory right now. Over here, so working with some of the darkest parts on this miniature, and we want to make sure to thin that out. Oops. So it's not too obvious. It shouldn't be obvious because it's in the dark anyways. There we go. Remove that. And then we want to make sure that we get our tail going. So we're just kind of dapping that on really softly. It's a little bit too bright. So okay, now we actually have this thing going on. So we're gonna up the lights and see how it works for us. Let's kind of turn down these lights a little bit. We kind of zoom out to kind of see if we are getting the translation right. Okay, so okay, there we go. Okay, so now that I've kind of changed the lighting on the camera, we can kind of see how the darks are. It's just kind of going around the those wrinkles a little bit more accurately now. And so we want to lighten those parts just a little bit. So we want to lighten the crevices in those wrinkles so they are not too dark. So we do it over here. So do it over here. And sharpen those parts. Here like this. Okay. Continue doing so. Kind of taking a little bit of skin tones and a little bit of teal. Going at it really slowly. Take more teal. Okay, from this side. Softly as well. You can see how it just manages to catch on the shape, and that's what we want. Later on when we put that matte down, it's going to really blend in, so I'm not too worried about it being a little bit messy. And down here. And down here. And over here as well, we want to have some really thin teals going on. Really thinned out. Draw on that shape. Okay. And then we want to have a filtered magenta kind of going across this whole area. But we're going to do it really thin. Right now as it is, it's still a little bit too thick. Boop, boop, boop. There we go. There we go. A little bit more magenta, just a little bit more over here. We can see that those wrinkles are coming on now. We need to get rid of that reflection later on. So that's where we're gonna pull out this thing. So I've had talked to several artists and they told me to get AK varnish matte, which is supposedly the best varnish, and I tried it out and I actually do believe that it's probably the best varnish, so we're gonna drop it on here. Just one drop is enough. And these matte varnishes, they really dry up pretty badly, and by mean badly I mean really badly. So you can see it over here that there are some kind of lumps, look like chalk on my palette, and that's originally that AK matte varnish. So what I did was that I think in a few videos ago I placed them in here to experiment around with what they would look like if they dried up, and placed some of the matte that I needed anyways on the miniatures. So now I know that even through the evaporation process, they still remain as pretty clumpy as they are. I'm gonna actually use my fingers here, just kind of remove that. There we go. It's kind of icky, kind of like gunk from somebody's mouth. Oh, so it's kind of ugly. Papa Nogo will be happy. Okay, so just kind of toss it away. Okay, so we're coming back to our miniature now, and we want to make sure to just kind of thin that matte. We don't need to be too matte, but just sufficiently over here. So just kind of place that matte down. Okay, we'll kind of place that matte down on our darkness where we need to be dark, so that that satin becomes really matte, and then we can continue painting with the right judgment of colors, because we don't get that glare in our face while we're doing our glazing and blending. Okay, so that's the benefit of working with matte paints. So we'll just leave that there for now, and we'll kind of focus on the hair, because that hair is like it just needs work. So let me see what we need to do right now. Okay, so if we look over here, that the hair is not done right. So let's just go ahead and add some skin tones to this hair in such a way so that we can catch on the parts that's the lightest. I'm gonna cover up the yellow. You don't really need to be too accurate with this, we just kind of need it to kind of make an impression of it. Over here and over here. You're not gonna touch that sword just yet, even though it's ridiculously saturated. And we want to make sure to really desaturate these parts of the head, like a lot more. Okay, kind of create a crown on her. So we just kind of do it in this way, and we'll leave that to dry. For the meantime, we'll add saturation to contrast, which is on the bottom here, that magenta. I don't really have a problem dousing it that much because it really needs to be that thick anyways, except for I think this part. You can just kind of develop it into the brightness a little bit more, a little bit more. Now it's gray a little bit, which is great. And we'll add just a little bit more yellow to define this part that's closest to the sword. Okay, and we just kind of leave that. Oops, I would leave that be. Alright, cool. Now over on this part, we need to actually start defining. We can see the shadows now are turquoise, which is great because that's how shadows should be like. However, there's a part where the light shines. If we kind of take it out from the top over here, it's supposed to highlight just enough of this area. And so we got those colors now, and so we can afford to do that, that highlight. So we'll just go ahead and add a bit of that skin color that we have, and then whoops, take this away, and then we'll just go ahead and dab it through the bottom here softly, so that we get our highlights shown, because it's going to show up in this kind of manner. So that yellow, that green underneath, we want to make sure those teal parts they show. So you're gonna remain it like this. I'm just gonna keep dabbing and desaturating. Right? Oops, sorry. Okay, there we go. So nobody gets an eyesore. Okay, over here. And we want to make sure that this part becomes ridiculously desaturated. So add some more skin tones. I need that as well. Underneath that area. Zoom it to the sides. Add a little bit more skin tone to this area, a little bit more. There we go. It's a little more accurate now. Can zoom it out. Okay. So that way it fits with most of the model. Probably need a bit more on this side. There we go. Now, for the floor, I'm actually going to paint the base later on when it dries to kind of create a, I haven't figured out if it needs to be ceramic or what color yet, but that's what we kind of do for the base. Let me see here. We need to make sure that tassel is colored later on. And right now, as far as the hair goes, you need to make sure that the lines in between where they shine off the chest and whatnot have the right color, because hair actually changes hue, color where it off of reflections that it shines from. So I need to work that on later. As for this part, you can see that the matte has dried. That's how quick it's dried, and it kind of looks really chalky. And that's fine because it actually allows paint to hold on to it a lot easier. And now that we have that, we can just kind of go ahead and take our paints and just kind of go through it. Oh, whoops, I need to get some primary cyan first. So let's clean up our palette here. Primary cyan has been on for way too long. That way, see, tinned. And we'll just take one glob and just kind of place it on the side because I do want to have that thinness added onto it. You can see how thick that cyan is from golden paints. Okay, and then I'm gonna place this at the side so it's becomes an even coat, and then I'm going to whoops, place my finger on the wrong spot. I'm gonna place here in the blues. I'm gonna filter that out to make it a little bit more smooth. Take more paints, take more medium, just kind of thin it out. Go with it a little bit more smooth. The amount of thinness of this paint, just go with it to make it more smooth and more smooth, step by step. No rush. Okay, over here as well. So this amount of thinned paints that we're glazing on is actually what's necessary for us to just get that nice smooth finish. So I'm gonna put some teal so it blends into those layers. So there we go. There we go. And not to worry about it being a little bit of a different color than the top, because right now the top is it's really in the darkness and it's a little bit desaturated. Too much magenta maybe. But for right now we just want to capture this part till we are satisfied. Okay, add just a little bit of yellow, just a little bit. Just kind of add it in like so. Just a little bit. Take a bit more yellow. Just kind of flow it into those crevices. Really softly. Really softly. Okay. Continue taking a little bit of teal. Blend into this area. Again, softly as well. Notice how I'm really lightening and thinning down my paints as I go over this portion, and that's because we need the paints to be really distinct if they are going to make our transitions that we have already placed on it look smooth. So that's what we're doing now. We're harmonizing everything. So when you need to harmonize something, you go with it in a really smooth, non-rush pace, and you go with it really softly, step by step, until you get the finish that you want. And it doesn't matter if it takes a while, it's going to be worth it at the end, because everything that takes a good amount of time with a bit of knowledge, we will have something that is worth our effort. Okay, so over here there's a little bit of paint that's a little too stubborn, so we'll drop it in there. Then we'll add this saturated point towards the bottom, like so, really softly. You can see that there's a overly saturated line over here, so we'll just kind of blend it in and out. Okay, I'm gonna take a little bit more teal, put the top and the bottom, blend it in as well, softly, really softly. Okay, and more as well. Oops, don't have enough paint. Over on this side. Okay, there we go. So you can see that becomes saturated too quick, a bit too quick. We're gonna blend outwards and outwards. A little bit more teal over here. Now we can actually add the saturated parts. And this just kind of looks great. Outwards and outwards. Upwards and outwards. Add a little bit of cyan. Blend it towards the dark. Like so. Okay, take more cyan. and then we'll blend it towards the dark. There we go. Okay, now for the top over here, oops, we will also need to do the same. We just saturate it a little bit more than what we have earlier. There we go. That's actually more than enough for over there. One over here as well. Another over here. Down here. And then we're gonna take that cyan and we're just gonna add annotations of it towards the end. Take our medium, plop it out so that we can blend that into the shadows. Take more of our cyan, blend it on top of that magenta that's in the darkness. I don't know if you guys can see it. Alright, let me see what else. So we actually have room now to really start to, since the model itself is really taking shape now, we can add this yellow. There we go. And we'll add one here as well. You know what? By the reason why we are doing this is because we want to grab that teal, pulling it to the bottom. This will later on will take some skin tones and just desaturate it a little bit, but we want to get that nice little streak that we have when the clothing goes into certain darkness points. There we go. There we go. And don't worry, we'll make it desaturated here by moving into the darkness and let it blend well. Over here as well. Okay. Allowing the yellow to kind of go over the other parts of the miniature a little bit. And also this part, desaturating that a lot more. We'll add some blue, of course, softly. Where there's some cyan, primary cyan, it just looks blue. And see that we get this nice little transition that's dark. Go here. And then we want to add this blue as well down here. Okay, because we want to portray the darkness and we want to bring up that saturation a lot more. Bring it out. Bring it out. Bring it out. We can see that we have just a nice little transition in our hands. This way. Okay, just a little bit more. Maybe it's a bit too bright. I'm not sure yet. Okay. Let's kind of zoom out for a moment and then double check what we've done. Let's see here. And probably in the next session I'll bring back that airbrushing box, because we have actually determined most of our grays at this point and we can afford to brighten them up, like at the end. So okay, let me see where else that needs to be. It needs to be a little bit more green on here. Okay, put that there. Let me see where, okay, those tassels. So let's just go ahead and add more illumination to those tassels because it's not desaturated enough. So place it like so. Place it like so, and then over here as well. Make sure to translate that. Don't worry about that line. We will remove it later on. Okay. Okay, let me see what else needs to be done. We need to actually desaturate this part of the miniature just by a bit. And then we also need to saturate it back up as well, just to kind of create a harmony. There we go. Put a bit more. There we go. And then later on, we will actually ink that place up so that we can get something that's more unified. But for now, this is sufficient. Okay, and let me see what else needs to be done. Here it's not that bright yet over on this part, so we will add more brightness to it. Like this. Okay. Keep adding it like this so we get something that's a little bit desaturated. Okay, and then we are also going to add just a little bit of teal so that we can bring that saturation up just a teeny little bit. A little bit more. Okay, there we go. A little bit too much now. There we go. Okay. We are also going to darken this part just as so. With a bit of brown, and then we'll refine the outer areas later, but for now it's so good that we've already defined that part. The hair, whatnot, we've gone a lot more accurate towards the ends. In the back here, this part of the sword is actually missing some brightness now, so we'll go ahead and solve that by placing some yellows, just a bit, 2, 3, 4. Okay, like so, especially towards the top, which is more important. There we go. And then we will take some, I would say, turquoise, blend out like this. So we get a really soft green. You see, it matches with the dress. And that's actually sufficient. We just need it to be a little bit rough. It doesn't need to be much at all. Because this part is not actually shine to the light side. There is a little bit. So we'll just add some more streaks, but just desaturate it a little bit. Like so. Later when it dries, it will solve most of our color issues. Okay, so let's see what we have essentially done. So the first one is that we have, well, this part needs to be yellow later on. Well, we'll do that later. So we have actually defined most of the colors on miniature. And it's getting more and more accurate towards this side now. And I'm actually really happy that this part which I placed on earlier is actually pretty accurate to how I discerned it at the beginning, so I didn't need to do it as a double. There's a lot of gray that needs to be applied to this part, and we'll do that after we change the lighting. However, for the grays and the darkness and the places that need to be saturated are mostly all covered. right? After quite a lot of layers, and that's actually great. Okay, so first off, remember guys, you need to learn from others to be yourself. I think in the last few videos I completely forgot to say that. Need to get used to going through these videos. Okay, so Tulu.